The Killing Sea, Chapter 14. Sarah pounded the water buffalo's head with the oar as water poured into the tilted hull. "Peter, help!" she screamed. He kicked at the closest hoof. Sarah swung the oar again. It broke in half on the creature's head. She threw down the pieces and picked up the machete, using the flat of the blade to smack its nose. At the same time, Peter gave its snout a hard shove with his foot. The buffalo's front hooves slipped off the boat. Sarah paddled furiously with the broken oar to get away, the half-submerged boat heavy in the water. The buffalo swam after the boat but couldn't keep up, the waves swamping its massive head, which sank lower and lower into the water. Finally, the head sank altogether and didn't come back up. Sarah stopped paddling and hung her head, panting hard to catch her breath. She felt sorry for the beast, but what else could she have done? "What was that water buffalo doing way out here?" Peter asked. "Maybe a boat sank." The sheet had loosened on its peg and the sail flapped. The sun blazed overhead. She'd been asleep at the wheel. Helms, she heard her father say, for at least 3 hours. Tiger Island was a blob in the distance, and the opposite horizon was filled with a glorious sight of mountains, foothills, and plains of the Sumatran mainland. Using coconut shells, she and Peter scooped water out of the hole before she set sail again. The boat headed for a cluster of small hills rising from the distant shoreline. She couldn't recall if Malibu, or however it was pronounced, had such hills, but that didn't matter. Wherever she landed, there were bound to be people who would help. Did they know yet about the disaster that had swept Tiger Island? She and Peter shared another coconut. He drank the slightly sweet milk, sipping between bouts of coughing. "We're almost there," she said. "We'll get you to a doctor, and then I'll go back and look for Dad. Lie down. You need to rest." Peter didn't argue. He curled up around the sailpost. Sarah adjusted the leaves over him, protecting him from the sun. The blue of the sea changed back again to shades of mottled brown. The boat bumped into an object. A man, floating face down. She seized the closest arm, cold and pudgy. With a shiver, she let go. Several more bodies bobbed into view. Another man and 2 women. The man was shirtless, the woman partially nude. The last one had her arm over something. The boat's bow wake rolled over her, and her arm slid off the bundle. A small girl. Sarah put a hand to her mouth to stop from crying out. She no longer thought a boat had sunk. She was beginning to suspect the truth. The boat sailed through the awful flotsam of several more bodies and other odd debris. A round yellow water tank, cushions, a floating fridge, an upside-down table with a body crumpled on top of it. The body stirred and croaked for help. Sarah let the sail flutter and paddled back in a hard circle to come alongside the table. She helped the woman slither into the hole. Her sarong and blouse were ripped, her headdress skewed. Once in the hole, the woman didn't move, breathing shallowly and licking her cracked lips. Sarah began to cut open a coconut to give her something to drink. A sharp flare of life returned to the woman's dried-out gaze. She seized the machete from Sarah's hands and in seconds had chopped open the coconut. She guzzled the nut, shaking it for the last remaining drops. "Tamina Kasi," she said to Sarah, thanking her. She seemed to have no curiosity at all about why a white girl would be sailing a small fisherman's boat hardly bigger than a canoe. The woman squatted to eat the meat. When that was done, she picked up one of the banana leaves draped over the front of the boat to stare for a moment at Peter. She carefully replaced the leaf and gave Sarah a brief, sympathetic look. She said something that Sarah didn't understand. "I need to find a doctor for him," Sarah told her. The wind had shifted. The boat would land well south of the hills. The shore drew nearer. Sarah eyed the shoreline, a long stretch of gray sand, surf foaming at its edge. The banana leaf stirred and Peter sat up. The woman shrieked, a hand clasped for her throat as she stared with fright at Peter. "Oh," Sarah said, with sudden understanding. "He wasn't dead, just sleeping." She put her hands together and rested her cheek on them to illustrate. "Sleeping." The woman relaxed and studied Peter. She scooted forward on the hull's floorboards and gave him a hug. He was drowsily confused at first, but then leaned against her. She felt his forehead, her brow furrowing at his fever. She said something to Sarah, clearly a question, but Sarah could only shrug and say, "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying." Several minutes later, they came into view, a man pedaling a children's stern-wheel boat, the kind she played on during summer camps at Cloud Lake. This particular boat, done up with bright yellows and reds, had a smiling fiberglass Mickey Mouse standing behind the seat as a Venice gondolier. The driver's right cheek was swollen with an ugly purple bruise. His unblinking eyes seemed to register nothing. He pedaled hard on the bicycle-style gears in catatonic determination, heading not for shore, but down the coast. The paddle wheel behind him churned a wide wake. "Hello! Excuse me!" Sarah called out to him as she spilled air out of the sail. He jerked his head up in surprise and stopped pedaling. "Malabo! Which way is Malabo?" He pointed in the direction he was heading. 60 kilometer. "God, that far? I need to find a doctor for my brother." He pointed behind him to the coastal hills. Kalan has military doctor. You go there. He bent his head and resumed his determined pedaling. Sarah glanced back at the Kalan Hills. What, about 15 miles away? And upwind, too. She tried tacking back and forth, but didn't seem to get any closer. The breeze stiffened, furring the sea with small whitecaps. After an hour, she figured that it would be easier just to land the boat on the beach and start walking. Sarah set the sail again and steered for the gap in the head-high surf. The contrary wind, though, pushed the boat to where the waves were the biggest, thumping onto the sand. The woman cried out in alarm. "Hang on!" Sarah yelled as a wave built up behind them. The boat surfed down the face. The nose dug underwater, and the stern flipped high into the air, throwing Sarah overboard. The last thing she saw before she hit the water was Peter's head bobbing on the foam and the hull of the boat falling upside down on top of him.